This is Al Fritz from earthhealing.info. Today we're going to be talking about legal moonshining. And we're talking with John Arvin, who's from the Kentucky Mountain Moonshiners.
Thank you guys for coming out. Like he said, my name is John Arvin. I represent Kentucky Mountain Moonshine. This is our family farm. We've always been on here doing cattle, and now we're doing moonshine. So welcome out to our place, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Yeah, we'll start all the way from the beginning. We're going to really start with our fermentation process. We're looking at corn right here. We're getting yellow corn. You can use a bunch of different varieties of corn, from yellow corn, the white corn, to even the blood corn they have out. Main thing is you want to mill it and cut it down. So you can see right here, kind of a nice little flour. That way it breaks those kernels apart and you're really able to get those sugars and starches away from that kernel. Once it's in this process, we take it over here to our first cook pot. We're getting the water really hot, boiling temperature, and we're going to look at make this corn heat up to about 170, 180 for about an hour. So once you throw it in there and let it cook, we got a nice little propeller, spins it around, that way we prevent it from scorching the kernels. Creates a really hard taste when you do that. So if you guys want to, you want to take a look in the fermentation thing. So we'll pull it up here. Alright, so once we get all the corn in here, we get it all heated up nice, and for about an hour, we're going to cut those heaters off, and then we're going to lower this cooling system into the tank. What this does is we're able to put our enzymes and then our yeast safely into our mash, and that way it doesn't kill it. So once this is done, we basically just let it sit there for about a week, and the fermentation will take process and the yeast really starts to take place. After a week, we take it into our separation tank and let that yeast settle down, and I'll show you guys in the next one. So once we start cooling down the mash, we look to put some enzymes in it. Where we don't use any barley, naturally the grains and stuff can't produce its own glucose and alpha amylase or any essential enzymes. So we got to extract it and put it in ourselves. Right here is our glucose amylase, and right here is our alpha amylase. Alpha amylase really pulls that sugar and starch away from that kernel, and your glucose just really enhances and also separates it further. So once you get down to about 110 degrees and below is when you throw the glucose on, and below 180 is when you throw that alpha on. So once you get those set and done and mixed up very well, you get the yeast, and this is dry yeast, or you can also have wet yeast. With the dry yeast, you want to hydrate it first and put in absolutely just straight H2O. Let that sit for an hour, and it's going to bubble up and really activate that yeast. Once you get that yeast activated, you throw it in your fermentation tank and it's ready to go.
Question, John. The illegals don't have the ground corn lath. They use more of the grain, the whole grain, right?
Yeah, just they don't really have access to much of the technology that we're able to get. I'll say they do a bunch of instead of the stainless stuff, they use some of these like plastic 55-gallon drums, metal containers, wherever you can find something that'll hold a bunch of liquid. I would say one thing about being legal is that you can really be out there and looking for really good technology and really good equipment, basically. One thing to go off on your whole kernels, they don't really feel the need that it needs to be like that because they don't really have access to the education. Say once you break that kernel across and you get it separated, your yeast is able to produce a lot more alcohol. So their efficiencies on the legal side is a lot lower than what we would be. And they're also not able to access the enzymes. They have to use barley, where it has their own natural yeast and their own natural enzymes.
Okay, good, good.
So right here is our separation tank. Once it's done with the fermentation process, it takes about 1 to 10 days in the fermentation process. We separate it out into a colder environment, and that way it really makes that yeast go dormant and fall to the bottom. So once you pump it in your still, it matters what kind of still you have, you don't want to scorch your yeast or your kernels. If you scorch your yeast, bad flavor. If you scorch your kern, very hot flavor. So once it comes in here, everything gets really cold and it falls to about right here. And then on the other side, we're going to have a little opening right here where we pump it into our tanks. So all that corn and the yeast really don't get into it. And we also filter it. So it's always good to do that. Alright, so we're over here past our separation tank, going into our stills right here. So right here you see our little pump right here where all the corn is going to be right there on the bottom, and we got a nice little liquid coming out here so we don't get much kernels. But I still like to be safe, put it through a filter before we put it in here. The reason why I put it in here, these are not steam injected tanks. They're mainly ran by like a hot water coil. So it really has direct contact with that liquid and a very hot single source. So you just want mainly all liquid and no kernels. Like I said, you just want to make it real smooth, no hot flavors. So we pump it into here and filter it, and basically just fill it up to about the top where there's a nice cone, and that way the evaporation of the alcohol is easily going up into a singular tube. The still I have right now is a Hillbilly still, 6-plated reflux still. Very, I would say, modern technology in the terms of distilling equipment. Essentially what this still does is where it has 6-plated and then it refluxes, it actually essentially distills about 6 times, where other people are only getting 1 distillation, and if they're lucky they're wanting to do 2 distillations. That way we're able to get a lot cleaner product and a lot smoother as it gets cleaner. So this way it kind of works is that, let me hang this up real quick. The way it still works is that it's cooking all that stuff on the bottom pot and it's evaporating that alcohol. Alcohol evaporates earlier before the water, and so we cook it about 185 is whenever your heads come off, and that's pure methanol. And that's kind of what the stuff that makes you go blind if you do drink that straight. So what we do is at that temperature, we kind of freeze it at that temperature, really boil it at that temperature, and we pull those heads off and we separate them, and we use them as fire starter. We clean our equipment with it. It's a nice sterilizer. It gets rid of all the bacteria and stuff. Basically just like hand sanitizer. So back to the still. The way it still works is that pot's going to be heating up, the alcohol is going to be coming up, and we got a thumper and then a condenser. And then if you want to come over here, we'll kind of go closer to it. Right here on most of your general stills, you're going to have a thumper and then a condenser. Your thumper is what's going to make it recycle itself until a certain proof, and then it's going to make it come across there still in the gas. And once it reaches that arch, it's going to be coming down into this condenser. You see how it's nice and cold? You can even have it room temperature, just something that's not 180 degrees. That way it condenses that vapor back into a liquid. Once it gets back into that liquid, it's coming down into this worm. It's filling this up, and this is just basically so I can separate about 100 milliliters off from each run and really taste where it's at in the run. There's 3 parts mainly in the run, which is your heads, your hearts, and your tails. Your heads, like I said before, is mainly methanol. Your tails is mainly your pure ethanol, and is what you really want. It's really good alcohol, really clean alcohol, not much more impurities, and has wonderful taste. And that will run it for about 2 hours to 3 hours at above 195 degrees to all the way about 205 degrees. So at that 10 degrees right there, we're looking at getting across probably about 10 to 15% of our alcohol product. Once it reaches 205, you kind of start wiggling with the boiling point of water, and whenever you boil the water from our mash, it really gets all the impurities and the other things that comes with the kernels and the water that mixes with the alcohol. And whenever you get that, it's very evaporative and unpleasant to have and to drink. You can really tell if a product has tails if you drink it and most of the heat comes out of your mouth, on your tongue, on your roof. Whenever you have good hearts, pure ethanol, you're going to take your shot, and all that heat's going to really sit in your stomach and warm you up from the inside out. So yeah, that's one thing that we really focus on doing, is just collecting those hearts and really keeping that boiling point right there between 195 and 205. So most of the distills that you see on the market is you're going to have your reflux stills, which is mainly like your vodkas and a clean whiskey. And then you also have what most mass distillers, your bigger distillers have, which is a column still. They're able to run continuously. They're much faster and they produce a lot more alcohol. They basically strip the alcohol from it, but they're not able to get a very clean product from your continuous stills. but that's mainly who uses that is your bourbons, your whiskeys, and that way they're able to fill up that 55-gallon drum at that 110 proof to 140 proof that they're looking for. You also have probably your most common still, which is your cone still. That is what you're going to mainly see in the backwoods if people are still doing it today illegally. Essentially you have one singular tube going into this arch and then going downwards. So like this, as it goes to the top, that vapor is coming up here and then it's angling down into this condenser where you can run water through it, cold water, which turns that vapor back into a liquid. I would say this mainly just strips it. You're not able to really recycle it or really get that vapor to turn on the copper a lot. So one thing you're looking for with these copper stills is that the copper reacts with that alcohol vapor and it really pulls away all the sulfur in it and reacts with it and makes it copper sulfate. Like wine and beer has a lot of sulfur in it. Sulfur can cause headaches, upset stomachs, and so whenever you pull it through that copper and you get that away, you're having a lot less likely of having those symptoms, and also you have a much cleaner product and a lot safer product. So once we get all the distilling process done and we have our pure alcohol, we're going to proof it down to really expand those flavors and make it safe for human consumption. The one main thing whenever you're proofing your alcohol down is that you want to use distilled water. You want water that's essentially pure H2O. There's no other impurities, no other chlorine or other chemicals in it like your tap water. Whenever you use your tap water, we accidentally did it in this batch, and you can kind of see how it turns cloudy. The alcohol really reacts with that chlorine, mainly in this situation, to turn that into a cloud. So it's easy, you can redistill it, and it basically just pulls out that water off from it. So you use a graduated cylinder and a hydrometer to tell what proof you're going to be wanting to put it to. And we have this nice little pot right here. We make a bunch right here. We got about 10-15 gallons in this pot we can proof down. And essentially what we're doing 180 proof to 80 proof, and so we're able to double our product by adding some water into it and making it more safe for the consumer to drink.
John has been telling us about the technical aspects of making legal moonshine, and you'd say, what on earth does this have to do with environment or earth healing? And I think that there are a number of areas that we should think about, at least in conclusion. And one of them is that, well, it adds value to what would otherwise be a commodity that is exploited from our Appalachian region with only a certain amount of economic value to it. Whereas here, there's enhanced value by actually making an additional product. And so that's really environmental in one sense. The second is it's done by a small operation. It's not some big company coming in and doing something in our region. It's local people doing something with products that they have in a very cultural way. The third is it can attract tourists. We have in Kentucky the bourbon trail now attracting 1 million people in the world. Why should not other areas of our enhancement of drink and so forth also allow other people to come in and see what is being done? And so therefore, because tourist is a low impact environmental operation. And another is it's legal. It's not something illegal being done in our country, and we like to stay with the laws. And last of all, it's cultural. It's something that's very compatible to our people. It's had a long history, and the histories of making really a good product that can be very helpful to everyone in the enjoyment which they receive. And so we can say environmentally, there's a good reason for why we should be a champion of legal moonshine. This is Al Fritz from earthhealing.info. Come and see us sometime.